All right, good morning again, everybody. Let's get started. My name is Nestor Diaz. I lead the Azure Task Force here at Inova Solutions, and with me today this morning is Enrique Corniel, the security specialist from Solvex Dominicana. Before we get started, a couple of quick housekeeping points. This is a smaller session. It has been kept that way intentionally because we want it to be a much more hands-on, as close to personalized as possible type of session. These sessions typically have a cap of 10 attendees, absolutely no more than that. And in this case, it's going to be, looks like a bit of a smaller session still. So that's not necessarily a bad thing because what it means is it helps us to really deep dive into your questions and into any needs you may have specifically at your organization. Now, let's move on specifically to the topic of questions. This is one of the newer type of Teams meetings, the webinar type of meeting. This means that currently your microphone and camera are disabled. So any question you do have, please feel free to type it in the chat box. There are several of us connected, not just Enrique and myself who are going to be speaking, but also my colleagues Adriana Wong and Marcy Van Oyen are going to be able to help us monitor this chat and make sure that your questions are in fact seen and answered. More than that, we have the capability of allowing you to turn on your microphone and camera. We can allow you to turn them on, but you have to actually go ahead and turn them on. So what we can do for questions that require additional clarification is go ahead and allow you to turn on both of those. You can turn on whichever you're comfortable with, whether it's both camera and microphone or just the microphone. And depending on how the session goes, we may actually just leave that enabled throughout the whole session because we really want this to have more of a conversational feel. We don't just want it to be a long, boring webinar. We want it to feel like an actual, as close as possible to an actual classroom scenario. We want to hear your questions and we want to be able to provide answers as quickly as possible. This also means that there's not going to be or we don't have to wait until a designated question and answer moment. At any time, if you have a question, please feel free to type it in the chat. If microphone and camera are enabled, feel free to unmute and actually ask the question. We do ask that we be, of course, considerate. If other people are asking questions, well, let's not interrupt the other people, right? Let's all be professionals. And then hopefully we can run the session as casually, as conversationally as possible. Now let's take a quick look at some brief introductions and maybe some points on our agenda before we actually get started. What we'd like to do today is start, as we're doing right now, with a brief welcome and introduction. We're going to start our workshop very, very shortly. I think it's probably going to be a bit sooner than 9:30. And that's going to run for a while. We're going to look mostly at theory in the first part of the workshop. We'll look a little bit at what a CM system is, what Azure Sentinel is, the capabilities it provides, why my organization needs one. Then we'll take a quick coffee break at 10:30 a.m. We can use that as a quick bio break as well. We'll get started 10 minutes after that with the actual hands-on lab, where we will be able to deploy our own Azure Sentinel instance connected to a special tenant we've provided for this session. And we'll actually be able to look at some of the signals we're getting and even at some threats happening in real time. We'll then finish up with a recap at the end of the day, come up with some news or provide you with some additional news on a follow-up workshop, which will be happening next month. We'll have a little test your knowledge quiz. If there's any questions that we haven't answered at that point, we'll answer them. And hopefully we'll be done by noon so we can all go eat something. These times are all GMT -4. So if you are in Jamaica, subtract 1 hour, I guess. A quick look at our agenda. Once we actually start the event, that is after that quick about us section, we want to look at the expanding digital estate that is typically the reality of all of our organizations. Our world is becoming increasingly technology focused, so that means it follows, right, that our IT departments and estate would grow in complexity. And of course, I need to find a way to manage that complexity. So we'll look at the security operations challenge that presents, how Azure Sentinel helps meet that security operations challenge, how you can modernize the capabilities of your security operations center with Azure Sentinel, what those capabilities are. We'll go into the coffee break, do the hands-on lab, and then look at additional or next steps. Now, before we do all of that, let's do some quick introductions. And you guys probably already know us, but we always like to go over it regardless. Who is Inova Solutions? Well, frankly, the best Microsoft licensing solution provider in the Caribbean. We are our clients' most valuable ally for digital transformation because we're committed to empowering your organizations to create business advantages by adopting digital transformation. Our goal is to help you build a sustainable path to digital, not just to force digital into everything, but actually understand where it fits within your business and help you so that you can better serve your customers and employees. Solvex, our partner, is in fact the best Microsoft partner, wrong way, for Microsoft Veeam and Adobe Cloud Solutions. They have a robust solutions practice that has over 10 years on the market and can help provide positive, strong customer experiences in everything related to cloud, whether that's Microsoft 365 implementations, deploying solutions on Azure, managing those solutions continuously, providing security consulting or security solutions for these platforms. They can do it all. So what can Solvex and Inova Solutions provide your organization together? Or of course, we can provide Microsoft licensing, and we have the strong Inova licensing background that helps us understand what the best way for your organization is to acquire these Microsoft products and services. That may sound easy, but if you've ever dealt with Microsoft licensing at a large scale, you know it's a little bit like the books Don Quixote used to read. They say they drove him crazy. Microsoft licensing can drive people a bit crazy as well. Fortunately, we have giants in our stead within Microsoft, within Inova Solutions that know Microsoft licensing like the back of their hand and can help you guys understand how to best use that licensing in your businesses. We can then provide user training, not just so that we're sure not just that you have the tools, but that you understand how to use them. And this training can be aimed at end users who simply have to access and use the tools that they need for their specific tasks. But it can also be aimed at IT pros looking for certification to understand how to manage these tools at a micro and macro scale within your businesses. And of course, we can also provide a wide array of IT solutions from consulting and guidance, pre-project or pre-deployment to actual deployment support to post-deployment support for solutions from Microsoft 365 to backup and disaster recovery solutions such as Veeam to many things on Azure, whether that's serverless computing today or artificial intelligence or backup and disaster recovery or lift and shift of your data center to the cloud. Whatever it is, we either can do it or we know the person who can do it, and we can help get your company there. Our speakers today are myself, Nestor Diaz. I lead the Azure Task Force at Inova Solutions. And this is a small group meant to help you guys understand how the cloud fits within your business and how you can leverage it for maximum benefit. My background is in IT and computer science, and my passion is to use that background to help organizations find ways to make technology work for you, not make you work for technology. Our main speaker for the day is going to be Carlos Enrique Corniel. He's a security specialist at Solvex, and he's really eager to share with you guys his passion and his love for all things cybersecurity. You're going to see that, I think, as soon as he starts speaking, he's very passionate about the topic. So, brief introductions done, housekeeping items out of the way. Let's get right into the meat of today's presentation. Enrique, we're all yours.
There you go. Hi everyone, my name is Carlos Enrique Cornel. As Nelson mentioned before, nice to meet you everyone. I hope you learn a lot in this workshop series about securing data and entities in this hybrid workforce that we have nowadays. So as Nelson mentioned before, I don't want this workshop like a boring theory webinar. So we're gonna dive a little bit in the theory, why a SIEM solution is necessary, what is Azure Sentinel capabilities, and what all of these solutions are so necessary nowadays. So after that, we are going to be talking about and we are going to be doing the hands-on labs. I'm going to give you some credentials so you can enter to Azure portal and go and see all the results and all the things that we're going to do later in the workshop. So first of all, expanding digital estate. So today organizations are faced with the incredible difficult task of trying to protect their expanding digital estate. So from increasing cyber threats. So the move to the cloud and mobile workforce have pushed the border of your estate beyond the boundary of your physical network. In a traditional network model, we used to bring our users, our employees, to our company security. But nowadays we have users and devices and systems everywhere. So meanwhile, the frequency and the sophistication of attacks are really increasing a lot. So regardless of the size of your organization or the industry that you're a target. So this is the major challenge and the struggle that we have in IT security. So we have, like as we see in the image, a lot of digital state that is increasing. Nowadays we have big data, a lot of sensors. So we have to implement security in all those edges. So talking about the security challenges, let's talk about first about the security operations challenges. So the expanded digital estate creates this significant challenge for your security operations teams, your SOC teams. So who are tasked with defining your extended digital estate. So the main problem is security data explosion. So as your digital state grows, does the volume of security data. In fact, 76% of organizations report an increase in security data. So much is coming into the cloud. As we move to the cloud, we have more increase in security data, a lot of logs, a lot of events that are moving also to security operations, and we need to analyze all those events. So pumping in that, there is a necessary of all the security operations teams to analyze all that data. Data is a field of machine learning models that have become so critical to threat detections, and the models that we need for more signals and more diverse signals. So the main problem in security operations, apart of the increasing all security data, all the points that we need to secure, is the shore up of our defenses in IT security. So by a report, and in it says that in 2021, right now, it's a shortage in around 3.5 millions unfilled security jobs right now. So it's a really shortage that needs to be filled to achieve all the security goals that we have in our companies all worldwide. So other security operation challenges could be lack of automations. If we have a lot of security products, a lot of security services, we don't have enough security employees, a strong, a robust security operations teams. We need to implement some automations, and there's where CM and source solutions go in. So a part of this, we have a lot of sophistication of threats that needs more time of our analysts to be on it. So talking about all that security operations challenges, we have how cloud and artificial intelligence AI can integrate and bring us a better solution to achieve and resolve all those challenges. So the cloud can help manage the complexity of the spanning digital estate. It simplifies and makes security easy to manage, and it's the power of the cloud. He will set the security operations teams, SecOps teams, free of IT work and help them focus on what is really necessary. So next generation of AI and automation in the cloud help us to supercharge your work. It would leverage the large scale of intelligence available and make it work for you. So we're gonna see as how Azure Sentinel use machine learning models to analyze billions and billions of events and logs and make insights on what is really important or what you need to pay attention to. So talking about Azure Sentinel, so repeating, so if anyone have any questions, any doubt, It doesn't matter. You can interrupt, as Nestor mentioned. You can write in the chat, and I can see, and I can ask. I respond all those questions before continue. So talking about Azure Sentinel, as I mentioned, we need a CM solution. And if we have a lot of security events, we also need automation. So we need a SOAR solution. So a CR plus SOAR tool to introduce a new cloud native is Azure Sentinel. Azure Sentinel is a cloud native CM that is built in the cloud with ease of deployment. We're gonna see that how simple is to deploy Azure Sentinel in Azure with a couple of minutes, and we're gonna bring all data connectors. And we're gonna integrate some data sources. And we're gonna see analyze some data that we have in that instance. So Azure Sentinel makes it easy to collect security data across your entire Hybrid organization, from devices, users, apps, servers, and any cloud. Also, Azure Sentinel have some integrations, some data connectors that we can integrate with AWS and G Cloud and G Suite. So use the power of artificial intelligence, as I mentioned, to analyze a lot of events, billions and billions of events from different data sources. Yeah, it could be on premise, it could be on the cloud, it could be from another cloud, and you can see the insights and why it's really important to you to analyze in your security team. So it's the main point of Azure Sentinel is cross up about cloud native. It's a cloud native solution. You can analyze any data that you want, even if you have a CM deployed in your on-premise environment. If you have, for example, a Splunk solution, CM solution, a curated solution, most of them use a standard CEF, a common event format, and you can bring all the data to Azure Sentinel, analyze it all in the cloud, and use all the capabilities about automation, about artificial intelligence in the cloud. And also, there is the last one, that is automation. We can also automate some alerts. We can automate all the alerts that we have in Azure Sentinel, and make an automation. We can integrate, for example, with Microsoft Teams. For example, hey, I got a new alert. Alert, create an incident. So incident is what we need to review as a security analyst. So we can make, for example, if Azure Sentinel create an alert and create an incident, we can also post a message in, for example, a Microsoft Teams SOC team that we have, or also create a ticket with API in a ticket system that we have. So there where automation and the power of automation goes in. So also, if you, for example, use automation, we can use flows using Azure Logic Apps. And there's where, for example, I received an incident, for example, from Palo Alto using a firewall solution. There's go, for example, it says, hey, I detecting a malicious IP. What do you want to do? It makes a little flow, and you're gonna see in brief. So I can make a proof or deny make on that flow that I did in Azure Logic Apps. So talking a little bit more about Microsoft Azure Sentinel, it's go across four main core functionalities of the four main capabilities of Azure Sentinel that are collect all the data that you want on your enterprise, detect all the threats that you have with use of threat intelligence in your environment, investigate all the data that we have, all the data that Azure Sentinel detect with artificial intelligence, investigate all that data guided by AI, and respond to those incidents. And you can respond from exactly from Azure Sentinel or from automated protection that we deploy using our Azure Logic Apps, as I mentioned. Something important is, for example, Azure Sentinel has a lot of integration with Microsoft 365. For example, all the logs, all the events from Microsoft 365, all the alerts that we have from there, Microsoft Cloud App Security, Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, Microsoft Defender for Office 365, even Office 365 events about Exchange, SharePoint, and Microsoft Teams. All those alerts are free. So for example, if we want to integrate all those alerts and make a trial and see how Azure Sentinel respond to all the incident and how to collect data, we can do it for free. So also, apart of this, Microsoft 365 have a lot of connectors. Microsoft 365 Defender, that is the suite of all the security solutions that we have in Microsoft. So it's really easy to integrate all those data connectors, as we're gonna see in the lab, and we're gonna respond probably using AI. So going deep about how you can modernize your SOC using Azure Sentinel. If you have, for example, a SOC team, a department, IT security department, how Azure Sentinel can modernize your SOC. It's based on all the capabilities I mentioned before, the use of threat intelligence, the use of hunting. That hunting is that we pass from a security position that all the increased data I need to analyze. I need to see if there is a IOC indicator of compromise on my enterprise. I can go from a defensive position to an offensive position. So I can go and see all my data and can run scripts, run queries, and we're gonna see using KQL, that is the use the query language, use the query language, that is the a read-only language that have built-in Azure to read data and build some workbooks on that. So Azure Sentinel, we can scale really quickly for all the digital state that we have. For example, I have, for example, millions and millions of logs. We can integrate all that data without limits in Azure Sentinel. So also offers improved threat detection, so we can improve all the threats detection that we have in our enterprise quickly. And also, as I mentioned, use AI and automation to increase efficiency of respond to threats. So talking about all the cores that I mentioned, collect, detect, investigate, and respond, collect, the main functionality about this is visibility, as we're gonna see. We're gonna start with collecting all your data, getting instant insight into that data via workbooks and queries. Workbooks are graphics, as we're gonna see, that we can see in an easy way all the data, all the threads, or the alerts that we have in our environment. So we're gonna see that in very shortly. Also, detect the threats. We use here analytics and hunting. Analytics, we're gonna use rule analytics, that are some rules that have built in Azure Sentinel, so we can run those rules. For example, hey, those all analytics and hunting rules are based in KQL. That's as I mentioned, are some queries. Azure Sentinel uses a lot of KQL, so it's very important to begin learning about all those languages that are used nowadays. So detecting using analytics and hunting, we can create some analytics rules to analyze, for example, hey, for example, remote desktop, an unknown remote desktop connection, we can create a rule. And hey, if you recognize this, create an alert. And also in detect, we have hunting. As I mentioned, we have a position of a defensive position. Now, right now, we can go from a defensive position to a offensive position. So we have all the events, billions of events in our environment, and I want to analyze all that data across all the stages of a kill chain, of the cybersecurity kill chain. We can go across using hunting. Also, using collecting all the data, detecting all the data, you have to investigate the data that we have and create incidents. So based on all those alerts, for example, hey, we have something here. We can have billions and billions of alerts, but using the built-in AI and the rules that we have, we create incidents. We can say, hey, from these alerts, I want to create incidents. So based on the incidents that we have, for example, hey, 10 fail login sessions in less than 5 minutes, we can create a policy that we in Cloud App Security that does that, or in Azure Active Directory, and investigate all that alerts and incidents. So responding, we have two options. We have a manual options that is going in the incidents option and assign a ticket and define a solution for that. For example, it's an alert, an incident from Cloud Security. You have the link to go to that alert to respond to that incident. And also we have automation that is using Azure Logic Apps. We can define a playbook. We have define a playbook to go and define a flow to automate and respond. So all those playbooks that I mentioned, all those workbooks, all those queries, all those analytics rules that are built in Azure Sentinel are powered by community, is open source, and is backed up by Microsoft security experts. So there are a lot of documentation about KQL, about how you can deploy, and even we have a lot of integration, for example, with hunting notebooks in the hunting part. You can even integrate with Jupyter notebooks and go from that defensive position to that offensive position. So talking a little bit brief, so all these core functionalities, all these Azure functionalities, let's go first with visibility. So we have one-click
Hey,
integration.
Enrique,
Yeah,
as we start to look at the individual tiers that make up the that guide, I guess, the feature set of Sentinel, maybe we can make a short pause if anybody has any questions, concerns, anything that they haven't understood, if they want us to go a bit faster, if they want us to go a bit slower, maybe they already know all of this, maybe it's new to them.
yeah,
Feel free to let us know. Microphones are activated, so you can type in the chat. And if you have no questions, please do type no questions or something similar. Uh, if you do have a
yeah,
question,
of
feel
course.
free to unmute and let us know. So, any questions up to this point? You can also use the nice little built-in Teams reactions there. Give us a thumbs up if there's no questions,
No
and it'll
questions so
keep on
far
moving.
from Kelvin.
All right, all right.
So far, so good. Thanks.
Perfect, perfect. All right, all right. So I think we're good for the most part. If anybody has any questions at any point, remember microphones are activated. Do feel free to speak up or to type in the question in the chat if you're a bit shy. Either way, we'll do our best to get to it as soon as possible. And I guess we'll keep on going, Enrique.
Yeah, of course. So we're going to be talking about all the capabilities about Azure Sentinel. First of all, visibility, talking about collect the data. We have one-click integration, as we are going to see with Microsoft 365, and a lot of all collectors, data connectors that are around almost 200 connectors that are built in Azure Sentinel. So we have Azure plus Microsoft 365 connector, and as I mentioned, all the alerts, all the loads that we want to integrate with Microsoft 365 and Azure are free. So there's a good point if you want to start using my Azure Sentinel. To learn how to use Azure Sentinel, you can integrate, if you have Microsoft 365 in your company, you can integrate all those alerts and see how it works for you. So also, we have integration with collectors. We have a lot of common, and we have CEF. For example, most of CM solutions, like Splunk, ASCII, EVM, QRadar, use CEF format, common event format, to correlate all the events, and we have a data connectors of CEF. So, for example, if I have an environment using Splunk, using QRadar and another SIEM solution, I can bring all that data from that SIEM solution and use all the capabilities of Azure Sentinel using hunting, using AI, and using automation to respond to the threats. So also we have syslog integration and Windows and Linux integration. If, for example, I have a syslog in my environment that I have, hey, I have all those logs, for example, routers, I have layer 2, layer 3 logs, I have servers logs in a syslog integration server. I can bring all those logs and bring it to Azure Sentinel to analyze it. We have some integration with Windows and Linux and data connectors. Even if we have some time, we are gonna see how to integrate a Windows Server 2019 with the data connector that we have in Azure Sentinel to bring all those security events, all the events that we have, even custom events that we have to Azure Sentinel to analyze. We have also Microsoft Graph integration and some APIs solution integrations. So for example, we can have a built-in application and in-house application. We can deploy an application to correlate all the data or make some integration with another app, or for example, an app I have in on-premise. We can do it using the APIs and MS Graph that we have. So the main thing, as we see here, is the in the right side, we have Azure Sentinel, and below Azure Sentinel, we have Azure Monitor Log Analytics. So that's something that we're gonna dive into in the lab. So, but we have the main requirement for deploy Azure Sentinel is deploy a log analytics workspace. So if we don't have a log analytics workspace where we integrate all the data, we cannot use Azure Sentinel. And Azure Sentinel deploy in, up to that local analytics workspace. We're gonna see it in, as we mentioned, in the lab. So also we have all these interactive dashboards and powerful insights. For example, we have some dashboards. As I mentioned, the dashboard is a graphic where below we have all the queries, a KQL query that bring all the data and transform that data in a graphic. So, also, we have a lot of built-in workbooks for each data connector. For example, if I want to integrate, for example, a Windows server with Azure Sentinel, we're going to see that we have some recommendations. For example, hey, we have some built-in workbooks, we have some built-in analytics rules, we have some built-in queries. You can use them, or we can use or customize or create your own workbooks using queries. So that's what I mentioned, that KQL is very important to use Azure Sentinel, but it's not so necessary because we have a lot of built-in and workbooks and queries. So it's very interactive. So in using this, we gain insight into one and a lot of data sources. So let's talk about analytics. That is the second one, talking about in the TED, talking about the analytics, talking about the hunting. As I mentioned, we have an extensive library of detention, a lot of rule analytics rules that we have built in Azure Sentinel. As you see in the image in the right side, we have a lot of rules that is built in Azure. For example, we have some rules that are in use. For example, hey, you have 51 and analytics rules that you can deploy, but I'm only interested in analyze all these three. So it's something that we can use, but it's recommended to use all the analytics rules to analyze all the recommendations that is making Azure Sentinel the built-in AI. So as I mentioned, these are built-in analytics tools, but we have the option to create a custom one, create our custom one using KQL. So as I mentioned, it have more than 100 built-in analytics rule playbooks and analytics rules. And also we have those analytics tools that we can make an integration. We can trigger automated playbooks. Playbooks it's not going to be part of this workshop. is gonna be in the second one, how to automate all those responses. We're gonna make some automation with Microsoft Teams, but we're gonna make some an overview of how it works. So talking about all the data, we have a new option that is user entity behavior analytics. That is a new solution that we have a couple weeks, I think 1 month ago in Azure Sentinel. There we can integrate and we have a user behavioral insights to detect anomalies and understand the how of the user. For example, if I have a user that have a suspicious way to of a suspicious behavior of how you log in or where you log in, it's gonna make based on AI make insights and say, hey, pay attention to this user because it's making a suspicious, it's having a suspicious behavior using all the apps. So we can see all that. And for example, if you see below, we see all the events that have, for example, for that user. For example, in this case, it's Jeff. We have the time generated, the anomaly name that have the tactic that Azure Sentinel is classifying in base of Mitra attack. That is a very famous security framework, and also the technique that is using and a subtechnique. All those techniques and tactics are based in Mitra attack. I can show you very quickly after we go into the lab and a very brief description about the anomaly. So talking about the machine learning, built-in in Azure, you don't have necessary to know a lot about machine learning because it have a lot of built-in models. You don't need a machine learning experience. It's not required. But as I mentioned, we have a lot of entry of data. We have billions and billions of data from network, from identity, from mailbots, from endpoints, users, and we can with Azure Sentinel built-in AI machine learning, we can analyze all the data automatically and see what is important to pay attention to. For example, you see that 50 billion of network logs, 32 million of identity logs, and that we convert all the data to only 111 incident candidates. And all those alerts, it's not necessary to pay attention. So Microsoft is going to analyze all that incident candidates and say, hey, I very think this is an incident. Pay attention to this. For example, to billions and billions of data, we just put all those alerts in 25 high fidelity incidents. So this is the very the need of a machine learning solution. As I mentioned, we don't need to have to know a lot about machine learning, but if we know if we have some knowledge about machine learning, we can also build in a machine learning model and integrate it with Azure Sentinel. So talking about hunting, as I mentioned, hunting is the part that we go from a defensive position in security as a security analyst to an offensive position. So as I mentioned, as we see here, all the analytics rules, all the rules that we have are based in Mitra attack. And also I think that Mitra launch and the Mitra defend that is for security analysts from the blue team. So we have all the data we have, for example, here, we're gonna see a lot of logs integrated. But for example, I want to know if really I have a suspicion, for example, here, a suspicion network traffic patterns. You can run that query. It's all these rule, all these hunting rules, all these queries are based in KQL. As I mentioned, KQL is literally in everything in Azure Sentinel. So it's important to learn KQL. So for example, we can run a hunting analytic rule. So as you see, you have some providers, a lot of hunting rules that are built in, and also we can build a custom one. So as I mentioned here, we have a lot of data sources, AWS, audit logs, and DNS, and there you go. and all that data is classified by the metric. For example, initial access and all those sub classifications. So here you can go deep on the data. For example, you don't need to wait for Azure Sentinel to analyze all the data that you have, all the data that is brought to Azure Sentinel from different data sources. We can go hunting in a specific objective. For example, if I want to know how is the security in my DNS, I can run all that queries and know if there is an issue, if there is an alert, if there is an incident in all the data that we have right now. So we are gonna see all this in the lab. We can also make a bookmark, and for example, uh, make a bookmark if you want to pay attention to that and later. For example, I can make a bookmark for the suspicious traffic patterns, and Azure Sentinel is gonna pay more attention to that one because you are saying that that pattern, that hunting analytic clue is important to you. So as I mentioned, we have some integration with Azure Notebooks and some notebooks to analyze data. This is all for hunting and investigation, and is you can integrate all the data, and using all these notebooks, we can go and analyze all that data using languages of Python, SQL, KQL, as I mentioned, and R. So talking about intelligence, that is also o- in the capabilities of Azure
Enrique,
Sentinel. Yeah,
sorry to interrupt you again, but maybe we can do another little checkpoint here so far.
yeah.
Um, if there's any questions about the pillars we've seen thus far, about the visibility tools, about how machine learning comes into the equation, the built-in rules, hunting.
What's Jupyter? So Jupyter is not only a machine learning notebook, it's a notebook built in with Python and other languages. We can have a notebook when we can integrate data sources and write some notes and analyze all the data that we have. It's more when I have an incident in security. If I have an incident, we can have a notebook. I can integrate the data, place it in a notebook, and make some notes of that incident. Those are the notebooks in security. But also we can use Jupyter. For example, if you are a data science, if you have a data analyze, you can use that to integrate the data to Jupyter notebooks and analyze it there.
Essentially, it's a tool to allow us to analyze the data and then, of course, surface the pieces that are important to us. In this
Exactly.
case, that would be pieces related
Oh,
to the to threats in my organization.
yeah. So talking about intelligence, anyone else have a question?
All right,
So
looks like we're
far,
good. Let's go.
yeah. So let's continue talking about intelligence. So as I mentioned, we have all the data, billions and billions of data. See that how we have almost 300,000 of TI indicators, the famous IOC indicator of compromise, and all that data from 9 the data sources, all all um, all convert in only 12,000 alerts based on all the data that we have in Azure Sentinel. So all those 12,000 alerts, we convert that data, Azure Sentinel convert that data in what is important to pay attention. Maybe those 12,000 is gonna only be 100 incidents. So that's it's using all the Azure machine learning built in Azure Sentinel. And talking about all the logs, we can see all the indicators. We can search for a specific one in the search bar using by name, values, or using even a KQL query and search, for example, for a specific IP, for a specific URL, for a specific host, And that, for example, in the threat intelligence, we can see how in the types we see, for example, hey, this all is talking about files, and in the values we have the file hash. So if you want, for example, analyze if that data is malicious, we can take that file hash that is unique for that file, analyze it, for example, in the platform as virus total. And also we have IPv4 address. Those are a public IPv4 address. If you, for example, have an IP blacklist tool, you can search, for example, if that tool is malicious or not, or even from where is that IP coming from. For example, if you are only a Dominican Republic service provider and you don't have any clients for China, you need to pay attention to those IPs. So also based on domain names and, as I mentioned, based on URLs. We can filter based on the type, source, and the confidence of the incidence indicators. So this is a new tool that we have made called watchlists, and even I would like to make a demo. So doing that, we can do that in the lab. Even like we don't have integrated a data source in Azure Sentinel. This is a really cool new features in Azure Sentinel. We can, for example, hey, your manager says, hey, you can analyze in Azure Sentinel those IPs that are not in Azure Sentinel. You can use, or you can see if that's those IPs that someone tell you to analyze. You want to see if there is an incident related to those IPs. You can, for example, make an CSV and an Excel uh, document. I put all the data that I want. For example, in the preview, he brought a time generated account and account type, and you can analyze all that data. I, for example, can make an IP address column, put put all the IP address I want to analyze, upload that CSV data file, and analyze that data in Azure Sentinel. Even if I don't have those IPs in Azure Sentinel in an event. For example, the main feature of this is if I have a lot of events and maybe those IPs are not malicious, but you want to know what's happening with those IPs or with those hosts or with those accounts, it says in the photo, we can make a custom document, upload it to Azure Sentinel, and analyze all the data in Azure Sentinel based on the CSV that we upload. We're gonna do it in the lab. So let's go brief in those in the last parts of the Azure Sentinel. This is about talking about unified insight with entity profiles. As I mentioned, if Azure Sentinel detect, for example, if a virtual machine that it says in the right side is having incident or having stolen errors, see how in the workbook you're having events and it says here, for example, in what time, in what day you're having events, what events, and if the events and alerts are integrated or are the same. So those Azure Sentinel integrate all the data and bring you the entity in Azure Sentinel. For example, quartip DC, a domain controller. It says the OS operative system type, Windows, the OS version, and all the data when coming from the IP address, when you see it the first time, when happened the last time, and all the data, all the alerts, all the recommendations that have, and all the vulnerabilities that are incoming for that entity. In this case, a device. So I don't know if anyone have more questions. We're gonna be talking about a little bit about the incidents, and we're gonna be talking about a little bit about automation. We're gonna be into the lab. So if anyone have any questions about intelligence, can make it now.
I do have one question.
Yeah.
Okay. In terms of in listening about the watch list, is there any integration for something like CVE? where vulnerabilities, etc., are announced or are released, does it integrate at that level as well? Because
No.
this would be a little different, I know, in terms of what you were talking about.
Yeah. Um, there is no integration with CVE, as you mentioned, but if you have, for example, a list of the CVEs, you can do it in a CSV document or a Excel document and upload that document. You are not limited because if you, for example, use a column, for example, for the CVEs or the system, you can make it in an Excel and upload that all to CVEs in Azure Sentinel. So you can do it in that way.
So when you upload the CVE, there is a function within Sentinel that understands what vulnerability or what incident or what type of information I'm looking for based on that CVE number.
More than understanding which CVE is, Azure Sentinel is going to understand the whole string. For example, CVE slash 2021 da 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 da. It's going to say, hey, I have the whole string. Is any other string that match this one? And it's going to make it in that way. In that way is
Okay.
that in that way is that watch list works. For example, if I put all the time generated, it's going to match all the events that have that information.
Okay. So let me try to explain it a little differently.
Yeah,
When we talk about the CVE list, which is a little different to what you're talking about in terms of the watch list, it's just that the watch list sparked my mind in terms of if it's an available feature. So
yeah,
the CVE publication would come out, I think, every day almost, or every other day, something like that. But essentially, it'll tell you all of the vulnerabilities that are they are aware of across either vendors or types of software that are out there. And let's say that you've got an application that's deployed in Azure. You've got it running on a virtual machine as an example, or you've got something taken out in the marketplace. And if there is a vulnerability that is associated with that application, you
yeah,
may have a CVE entry for it that has the description of what the vulnerability is, possible workarounds, etc. But usually there will be some type of information that tells you, it's a version of Java that may be a possible flag for this
yeah.
particular CVE. So I'm just wondering if Sentinel can take that information, or is it in any way able to use that information to kind of identify, I guess, almost like the threat hunting, to kind of identify
Okay.
possible vulnerabilities that you have in your environment.
Yeah,
Can add maybe a bit of context to that. And
yeah,
Enrique, feel free to build upon this as well. So there's a couple of different security tools in Azure. As on top of Azure Sentinel, we also have things like Azure Security Center. Azure Security
exactly.
Center is exactly best practice recommendations based on things like CVE lists. Now, Azure Security Center has a paid tier called Azure Defender, and Azure Defender proactively monitors every new publication of CVE lists and then monitors my environment for instances of potential vulnerabilities, and then recommends mitigations for them. We can also take, if I have any other tool that also looks at CVE lists. So for instance, Tenable also looks at CVE lists. So if I already have an existing investment into Tenable, I can take any of those tools and their output and add that to the ingest of my Azure Sentinel solution. And in that way, I would also be able to take advantage of those. So there's several ways to integrate CVE lists and publications into a Sentinel or Azure Security Center deployment.
Okay, so from what you're saying, it would be more having the Defender product
Exactly.
deployed and then letting that feed into Sentinel, where
Yeah,
you would then
Correct.
is
observe if there
is
are
as
any hits or
Nestor.
triggers against that. Okay.
Yeah, it's as Nestor mentioned. It's not using watchlist. It's not instead of that. If using another product as Azure Defender is the base solution as Nestor mentioned for Azure Security Center. You can deploy Azure Defender for a virtual machine, for a SQL database, and all those vulnerabilities you can integrate all of that in Azure Sentinel, but it's using another product. A part of Azure Defender, you can even use Defender for Endpoint if you want to know all the vulnerabilities that are related to all the products that you use in an endpoint. For example, if you have an endpoint some updates that are missing. For example, I was analyzing even yesterday some endpoints that have the recency today in Windows 10. You can we're gonna see how we're gonna integrate all those Defender for Endpoint alerts. If you, for example, have a new vulnerability, a recommendation, a weakness in Defender for Endpoint, you can bring all that data to Azure Sentinel. But it's as mentioned, as Nestor mentioned, is using another product that does the vulnerability scan.
I see we also have a question from Judith. Feel free to unmute and let us know, Judith.
Good morning. To follow on from Calvin, when it comes to the CVE, we had an example recently. There was a vulnerability. It showed up in the Azure Security Center. When we clicked on the details, it gave us not only the issue and the assets affected, it gave us some steps to remediate, and there was a link
Exactly.
that you can actually click on to go directly to the CVE. And what we're also considering right now is also turning on Defender, Azure Defender, for more security. And based on what you just said, we are also looking at Sentinel, but I like the fact that you can, connect Defender to Sentinel as well as the Security Center. So I like what I've been hearing so far, because we have these components, but we don't really understand how they all integrate.
Yeah, even just for your case, Judith, we can see in the lab how we can integrate with just a few clicks, how you can integrate an Azure Sentinel instance with Azure Defender. It's really quickly. All the products that are from Microsoft are really easy to integrate with Microsoft Azure Sentinel.
And then to even add some extra context and maybe spark the creativity of possibility, if I can get a bit poetic here, for you guys. These capabilities have sort of been born Azure first, but using tooling such as Azure Arc, we can expand these monitoring, this scanning and constant sort of AI and overview capabilities to our on-premise networks and even to multi-cloud networks. So you can have Azure Defender, Azure Security Center, and Azure Sentinel also looking at on-premise servers or at servers that maybe you have on AWS or the Google public cloud. So there's a lot that we can do to ensure that your SOC has a sort of single pane of glass overview of your entire IT estate.
So I think we can continue talking about the incidents in Azure Sentinel. So talking about the incidents, we have container for alerts, events, and bookmarks related to a particular security threat. We can also automatically create from alerts or initiated by security analysts. We can, I see an alert that is not in an incident. We can manually create an incident as a security analyst. We can assign to analysts all that events or that incident to be investigated, as we see here that the owner is unassigned. We can see how we can assign all those incidents, how the security analyst is going to reach to that incident. So we can also add tags and comments to that incident in order to, for example, another security analyst or a SOC manager needs to know what happened with that incident. It's going to say, hey, that was a false positive, or that was from that IP, it was a test, and you can make that comment below here. In last comment, or if there are some security analysts that are working on that same incident, they can make some comments here in the comments part. And also from here, we can go from view full details about the incident, and also we can investigate the incident. So we can investigate right from Azure Sentinel if it have integration to investigate right there, for example, from Microsoft, or go directly from where happened the incident. For example, if it was in Cloud App Security, it's gonna have a link to go to a Cloud App Security directly to the incident, or to Defender for Endpoint, or Azure Defender, as mentioned Judith. So here you're gonna see all those incidents based in a incident ID. We're gonna have an incident ID based on the creation, increasing from 1 and 1. And we have also a category. For example, if you see here, uh, based on the analytics rules, as we see, we have a severity. For example, if it's informational, if it's low, if it's medium, if it's high, or if it's critical. And based on those categories, we're gonna have a priority in those incidents. So based on the incident, we have how many alerts, what happened in that incident. For example, if it was a failed login, we're gonna have a lot of alerts from the same incident. And if it's only one user that are having problems with fail to login, for example, in Exchange, for each one that the user is not entering in the change, it's not gonna create an incident for that. It's gonna create only one incident based on those alerts that are related to the same entity. For example, if a device or a user. So you see all the alerts that are related to that incident. The products, if it's Azure Security Center, is gonna say here, yeah, Microsoft asks about for Security Center. When was created, who is the security analyst that is investigating, we can make a rule that all the incidents are assigned to the same person, or in order that we create some incidents, we can make it assign those manually. The status, if it's new, we can update the status based if someone is working or not in them. We can put it in progress if someone is working on that, or closed is we finish to analyze that incident. So also we have built-in in Microsoft and in Azure, we have some sandbox capabilities. For example, if you want to analyze some incidents, for example, an URL detonation, for example, if in a change it detects some malicious attachments or links, you can bring it together and analyze that and all those incidents. We can run the links, and we can see it here. We can run all those links and see what's happening in that link. For example, we can run it, and you see, for example, if it's malicious or not. You see, for example, the URL that is reaching to a Microsoft login phishing site. You have the URL. For example, if you see here, it's HTTP, it's not HTTPS, it's not encrypted, and if you see the domain, it's not an official domain. So you can see here in all the investigation about the incident, we can analyze in a sandbox and Microsoft sandbox and see what's really happening with that data. See if it's an IP is malicious, see if the URL is malicious, if an attachment has a malware inside, and that. And analyzing all the data and make a conclusion about what happened and if it's really an incident or not, and classify if it was a true positive or a false positive. So talking about the last capability, that is automation. As I mentioned, we are not talking about automation in the lab here, but we are going to be talking in the next workshop, and we are going to integrate all those alerts, or those threats alerts, or those incidents. We're going to integrate it with some platforms as emails, as a flow. We're going to create a playbook. We're going to make some flows to approve or deny some incidents, and we can respond easy to those incidents. So for example, to use automation in Azure Sentinel, we need a specific product that is used in Azure, that is Azure Logic Apps. Using Azure Logic Apps, we can design a flow in what's going to happen if an alert of an incident is triggered. For example, we can see in the image how when we have as Azure Security Center alert, the flow is going to be triggered. It's going to start. For example, it's going to create, first of all, an incident in ServiceNow, a ticket system, a ITCM system. If you have another one, we can see if they have an API to integrate with Azure Logic Apps. We can post a message to a SOC channel in order to all the security analysts analyze what happened with that incident. It's not necessary to enter to Azure Sentinel to analyze the data or see if an incident was triggered. Send an approval email. That is what I mentioned at the beginning. We can have a condition if what happened or not, if the flow is accepted or not. For example, in this case, it's talking about an Azure Security Center alert, talking about a Palo Alto and a malicious IP. So for example, if you approve in the flow the condition, if the condition is true, we're gonna block the user in Azure Active Directory, and we're gonna block the IP in the firewall. If you check false, we're gonna close the incident, and we can make an action or make a comment if it was a false positive or not. So these are some of the capabilities that we can make with automation. As I mentioned at the beginning, it all depends on digital estate, and with the shortage of security professionals, we need automation in our SOC teams because we have a lot of alerts, we have a lot of incidents to analyze, and maybe we don't have time for all of them. So we can start with some playbooks to integrate some incidents, respond in that way. And there are around 200 and more playbooks that are built in with the connectors, so you can deploy it easy with Azure Sentinel. But as you see in the queries and the KQL and the hunting queries, we can make a custom one. As I mentioned, this is gonna help with we can integrate with an incident management. We can open a ticket and assign a ticket to an analyst. For example, you can open a ticket. There is integration, for example, with ServiceNow and Jira, and we can see what is gonna happen with that incident status, and we can post a message, for example, in a Slack channel or Teams. We can investigate in a quickly way, for example, looking for an IP or trigger an investigation or an email validation to an user. And based on that automation, we can make an action if you're going to trigger a conditional access, if you're going to enable MFA for that user, only to be sure that that user is logging in, if you're going to block the user access, or you are going to block the IP address that the user is logging in. For example, if you have an alert that, for example, I'm logging in here in Dominican Republic, and someone in the same moment is trying to log in China, is going to reach an alert and it says, hey, based on your usage, you are not used to log in this country. You want to block that IP, or you can deny that approved email, and it's not gonna do anything, and the ticket is gonna be closed. So those are some capabilities that we have with all the playbooks that are built in Azure Sentinel and Azure Logic Apps, but we can build some custom ones. So I don't know if you have any more questions about all the capabilities that we mentioned before we start with the lab. So the dynamic is, if you have any question, you can start writing it or talking with a microphone. We're gonna be, I'm gonna be giving a credentials. I'm gonna mention in the chat, giving you the email and the password for that credential, and you can go in the Azure portal.
So we do have capability for all of our attendants. You're all going to get a user. Just make sure not to grab someone else's user. We all have our own little spaces to work in. There's really data we're all going to work with is the same, but we want to make sure we each get our own little working space. Before we move on there, if there are any questions at this point, feel free to unmute while we have our attendees sort of work through those potential questions. We're also going to have a quick break before we actually go into the hands-on session. The break was scheduled for 10 minutes, but we're actually running a bit ahead of time, so we'll do 15. Feel free to take a quick bio break, grab that coffee, whatever you guys need. We'll be back here in about 15 minutes. Before we go, we've already had some of our users introduce themselves in the chat. What I would like to do is actually hear you. We've heard from a couple of you.
Yeah, it would be great.
So we actually have a couple of Inova team members as well. So what we'll do is we'll start with the Inova team members and have them introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about their different work areas. They're here just joining us and shadowing the session. It helps them prepare for similar sessions in their own workspaces. So we'll start with Eeny, Meeny, Miny, Mo. Dane, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Good morning, guys. Dane Smith here. I'm a cloud solution specialist. I specialize in Azure related tasks, and I'm based in Jamaica.
Awesome, thank you, Dane. Let's see who we also have. I know Javier is actually not around. Francis, are you there? Can you tell us a little bit about your work in Inova?
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. I am Francis Iriarte. I'm one of the technical support specialists, part of the Inova team in Puerto Rico. I am actually growing in the Azure area along with Nestor and the rest of the team offers. So I'm here learning as well as all of you guys and to grow the expertise.
Awesome. Thank you, Francis. So maybe we can hear then from some of our attendees. What we'd love to hear is a little bit about what you do and your level of experience with Azure. The reason we're doing it now is because it'll help us gauge the pace at which we should go during the workshop. Adriana, you had an additional comment there?
Yes, good morning all. No, so I'm like, wait, what about us, Nestor? No, so hi everyone. So my name is Adriana. I think most of you would know me by now. I'm the one that invites our customers to these type of bootcamps and webinars. So mainly you'll be seeing me as your contact person within our marketing activities. So glad that you are joining us. I hope that you are observing all the content that you are receiving from our speakers. So yes, I'm the marketing manager at Innova Solutions, and one thing I wanted to just to say is that at the end we have a test your knowledge quiz, right? So please pay attention because you will be tested. So do not forget that. So yes, and then with me I have Marcy. So Marcy, go ahead and unmute yourself and put your camera on, right? So if you guys want to put your camera on, you know, it's we are not in person, but it will be nice if we can see some faces because it's oh you should mute. So we're sitting next to each other, Marcy and I. So if you have so if you want to put your camera on, it's all up to you, but you're welcome to do so. Marcy, take over.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. We're so happy you joined us today. Adriana and I asked the same question at the same time, like, what about us? I mean, we're part of the team as well, Testar. How could you forget us?
Sorry,
No,
you're
but
right. You're right.
No, but we were so happy you guys joined us today. I'm the digital marketer here at Inova Solutions. So if you follow us on Instagram, on Facebook, or on any other platform, those posts you see, those are me. We're so glad you joined us today. And Enrique, thank you so much for your expertise. You know so much. You're so knowledgeable. And Nestor always being the amazing host that he is. We're very lucky to work with a team of experts here at Inova Solutions that are ready and willing to share their knowledge. It's such a pleasure working with you guys. And yeah, I hope you guys all enjoy this bootcamp session.
Thank you, Marcy and Adriana. Maybe we can hear from some of our attendees now. I'll start with some of the ones that have already spoken to us. So maybe Kelvin, You can tell us a little bit. I know you posted a bit of your background in the chat, but maybe you could tell us a bit about yourself.
Sure. Name is Kelvin Aline. I'm with CIBC First Caribbean as a solution architect in this phase of life. I've been a few different things there so far. And I am primarily working around infrastructure and cloud architecture at this point. So a lot of the solutions I'm working on are involving or tending to involve Sentinel more and more, or at least the idea of involving Sentinel more and more. So I decided to jump in and kind of have a deeper look.
Perfect. Awesome. Awesome. What about your level? Well, I guess because of your job, you would have, and that's what you shared in the chat, some level of maturity with Azure. So you're welcome to join us in the lab. We're sure you're going to be able to follow along swimmingly. And we actually invite you to join us in the next one as well, where we look at automation. I think that's going to be very interesting and helpful for the team at CIBC. Judith, maybe we can hear from you now.
Good morning, everybody. Judith Sargent. I am the application and cloud security manager here at First Caribbean. So we're doing a deep dive into security for M365. We have various Azure tenants. So yes, I'm somewhat familiar, and earlier this year I got my Azure Security Engineer certification. Prior to joining First Caribbean in February, my background was years of experience in AWS. So quite a bit of security knowledge and background and experience, but looking forward to this session because we are actually now focused on using Sentinel. So that's why we came eagerly to this workshop. So thank you.
Perfect. Thank you for joining us. We'd like to hear a bit more from the rest of our attendees now. Maybe Anthony, we could hear a bit from you.
Anthony McLean from Jamaica, IGL Limited. As I stated earlier, we are a gas company. We deal with LPG and industrial gases. And yes, I'm happy to join this workshop. I have very limited knowledge of Azure, but I'm sure it's the future. So I'm very happy to be on this workshop. So thank you for inviting us.
Perfect. We're very glad to have you, and we'll really be going step by step in the next sort of work lab. So we hope you will be able to follow along. If at any point there are any questions or concerns, let us know. We're here for you.
Okay. Thank you.
For attendees that join both our sessions, there's actually also going to be a manual with the steps that we followed in both sessions, and with some sort of best practice recommendations as to how to implement Sentinel and the different data sources we connect. So we encourage you to be able to join our second session so you're able to get your hands on that guide as well. All right, can we hear maybe a bit from Maria Silvia? Could you tell us a little bit about your role, your experience with Azure?
Hello?
Hello?
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes.
Yes, I'm not Maria Silvia. I'm Cesar Calderon. This is from J. Jaramillo Insurance. It's an insurance agency in Puerto Rico. We just deployed MS365 this past August. So I'm in the IT administrator here at J. Jaramillo Insurance. So we have very limited knowledge of Azure.
Perfect. So now we know it's actually Cesar with us. Welcome, yes. Cesar. But still, I think you'll really enjoy the lab. One of the things we're going to be looking at is how to connect your Office 365 tenant to Sentinel. So yes. It's a great starting point for you guys to look at these security solutions on Azure. And then we can, alongside Juan Carlos, who I believe is your account manager, continue to look at how they can help you with your on-premise workloads.
Great, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. And then we also have Ronald with us. Could we hear a bit about yourself, Ronald?
Hello, my name is Ronald. They call me Ron at Wafa. Been at Wafa for about 2 years now. This is the place where I started my cloud journey. So at Wafa, I'm a system engineer, certified in Azure, and I'm just here to continue to learn everything about the cloud.
Perfect. Awesome to have you here with us, Ronald. All right. So the credentials for the hands-on lab have actually been shared. Do feel free to start going to portal.azure.com and try to log in using those credentials. If, like myself, your Teams window has a black background and you can't really see their credentials, feel free to actually just highlight them and you'll be able to see them, copy and paste them. Every attendee has a credential assigned. There is spaces for all of us to work on. You each have your own resource group that is isolated from the rest of the class. So feel free to start logging in. And if there are any issues logging in, let us know. Post them in the chat, and we will take care of those before we start. As you guys take a look at that, we're going to go ahead and actually take a little break. So it is, by my calculation, 10:24 a.m., 9:24 for our friends in Jamaica. So I'm going to round that up to 10:25 or 9:25. And let's come back at 10:40 or 9:40 for our friends in Jamaica. If when we return there are any issues with logins, we'll start working on those and then move right onto the hands-on lab. So we will be right back in just a couple minutes. Enjoy your 15-minute break.
You know the login. Could you repeat the login once again?
Yes, they are. The website is, it's all in the chat. The website is portal.azure.com. And then you will find a message where you are tagged by name that has your email and password. To answer Judith's question, it's absolutely fine if you join from a personal laptop. We're going to be working with test environments and test data, so it's really absolutely no problem. In fact, if you do have a second screen, it's going to be even more useful, a second screen or a second device, because you can then look at what Enrique is doing while also following along on a separate monitor. It is possible to do it on a single screen, but it's a bit trickier. We'll try and go slow so you guys can follow along. Most people here I see have some Azure experience, so it shouldn't be terribly difficult for you guys. All right, so we'll keep monitoring the chat. Feel free to keep writing to us. Quick break. Be back at 10:40. See you guys in a bit. All right, we are back. Hope everybody enjoyed their break. Hope you were able to go get your coffees. So let's get started with our hands-on lab. Was everybody able to sign in? Just a quick confirmation, drop a yes in the chat or use the team's reaction. I see Judith gives us a thumbs up. Good. Francis, you had a question or just confirming that you signed in?
Yes, yes, yes. All right. So I think we can start.
I think so.
Yeah. So if you log in Portal Azure Portal, in the link that we provide you, in portal.azure, you're gonna see a page as we see it here. I log in as a Work Lab account to see everything as you see it in your Work Lab account. So you're gonna have some resources deployed. All the resources are deployed in the same subscriptions that is named Assets Infra 2, SMDM, but everyone has their own resource group, but you are only have to able to see only your resources. So for example, if I have all my resources, I cannot see the resources for another resource group. Only you have able to see those resources. Is set for me, of course. So let's go into it. So as I mentioned in the lab, and the first I'm gonna see here, I'm gonna mention that we have the resource group. I have some resources that we have deployed, some workbooks, a local analytics workspace, and you're gonna see how to deploy in Azure Sentinel the instance that we have. Everyone has their own instance right now with some incidents, some false incidents, some alerts, and we are gonna analyze all that data. But first of all, we are gonna see how you can deploy Azure Sentinel and how easy it is to do that. So let's go to our resource group. You can go for it here in the search bar. Voice name RG WordLab ST and the number of your account. In this case, I'm in WorkLab SS1. If you're, for example, in WorkLab SS2, you're going to have resource group WorkLab S2 ST2. For example, let's go to that resource group. So if anyone have a question, feel free to write it in the chat, and I responded immediately. So the thing is that I don't want everyone to get stuck in a part. So for example, hey Enrique, I didn't understand that part, or I didn't reach there. Can you repeat? There's no problem. So I'm gonna show you how to create, first of all, a local analytics workspace and how to create an Azure Sentinel upside of that local analytics workspace. So let's go to the create button in the resource group. And let's create a Lots Analytics workspace product. So let's go in the search and look for Log Analytics workspace. Let's check this one, and we're gonna see the button of create. So after you create, you're gonna ask some information before Lots Analytics workspace deployment. So you're gonna have the subscription. You're gonna only have that subscription to select. You're gonna have the resource group. Select the same resource group. There's no need to create a new one. And let's put a name. If you want to put a name, you can put, for example, LW and your name, for example. So we can select the region that we want to deploy, and we can do it in East US 2. So after that, we can select the pricing tier. We're gonna leave it as pay as you go. We're gonna have that part in available in pricing tier, and the tags for is only a test because we all have all the resources, local analytics, and Azure Sentinel deployed with some incidents, with some data integrated. But let's go to review and create, and let's create the resource. And you're gonna see how easy is to deploy a logs analytics workspace. That is the main requirement, as I mentioned at the beginning, to deploy Azure Sentinel. If you don't have a logs analytics workspace instance, you are not gonna be able to deploy Azure Sentinel. Also, if anyone would like to know, and it's not part of the lab, but if anyone wants to know how Azure Sentinel is priced, how is the pricing model, and we can talk about that at the end of the lab. So if the deployment was succeeded, let's go to that resource, go to the resource. We have some information about the logs analytics. We can modify, for example, if you want to measure how the data goes in Azure Sentinel, how's gonna be the cost, that's really important for your company. You can even modify the data retention, and by default it's only 30 days free. If you want more days, it's gonna cost after those days, as you see there, is 30 days and it's completely free. But if you put some days, it's gonna cost you some more. So if you want, for example, limit, for example, the daily cap, that is the maximum of data that you can ingest in local analytics workspace and in Azure Sentinel, in order to control what's going in and not having a billing at the end of the month, like $2,000 and that kind of things. You can say, for example, daily, I only want 0.16 gigabytes per day, and in that way you can control how many data is going in to local analytics and Azure Sentinel. So if after we deploy local analytics, let's go to the search bar and look for Azure Sentinel. It's maybe on the home screen in here. If you don't look for it in the search bar, let's go to Azure Sentinel. Here you're gonna see the instances that you have, or even to create a new one. So you're gonna have a one created that have all the incidents, all the data that I mentioned. So let's create a new instance. So the only requirement, as I mentioned, is the logs analytics workspace. So after you create, you have two options: or select a already created log analytics workspace, or create a new workspace. It's only gonna redirect to log analytics product, and you need to create a new one. But here you're gonna see the one that we created before. So you select that and click add, and in that way is how we deploy Azure Sentinel in our subscription. See how easy it is to deploy how to deploy Azure Sentinel in Azure. So as you see in the main page, you have three main tasks at the beginning of the deployment. The first of all, collect data. Without data, we don't have anything in Azure Sentinel. After that, you create security alerts, you create the queries, you create all the analytics to analyze, and also you can have that last task that is for automation and orchestration, but based on your needs. So in this way, is created Azure Security Center, Azure Sentinel, and let's go to Azure Sentinel, and let's go to the logs analytics, the Azure Sentinel that I created before, that is named LRW WordLab ST and the number of your account. If anyone got stuck, please let me know, and I can repeat something that you would like to know. So Marcy is typing. So here, as I mentioned, we have the three main tasks. So if this is the complete panel of how Azure Sentinel looks, and we have three main areas. Yeah, so we have three main areas like general, threat management, and configuration. All the part of configuration is all about integration, data connectors, analytics, watch list, and some solutions that are integrated all in the cloud. So we have the threat management, that we have all the things about incidents, about webhooks, about hunting, and all the threat intelligence. And we have also, in general, some things about what's new. We have, for example, what are the latest updates about Azure Sentinel. Azure Sentinel is always improving and always upgrading all the workbooks and analytics, and bringing new data connectors to Azure Sentinel. If you go to Azure Sentinel, you're gonna see you have a very interesting pane of glass about how the events are integrated in Azure Sentinel, about the alerts that you have right now and some incidents that are not malicious, but I created on purpose in order to analyze them. So you see, for example, around some incidents, some alerts, and some events, some alerts, and some incidents. And we have this graphic that is a workbook based on all that data that we brought together to Azure Sentinel. We have recent incidents in base which alerts, for example, email message containing malware, that is an alert informational that remove a malware from that email and is only letting you know that it was removed. We have some data sources based on Office activity and some device network info. So, for example, we have here in the graphic some about information with the color of activities in purple, alerts are in red. And for example, we can click in alerts. We can see which query is being run to bring back all those alerts. For example, it runs this KQI query talking about security alerts, where provider name is ACR security alerts and that provider name. We can see all those alerts based on that name, where it was created, who was the vendor, system ID, and all that stuff. So first thing, as I mentioned at the beginning, is data connectors. So here I have all the data connectors that are available to integrate with Azure Sentinel. Right now are 116 connectors, data connectors that we have integrated, and all the connectors that we have already connected. I already connect some data connectors in order because you have a high privilege in order to make a deployment of a data connector in Microsoft 365. If you want to deploy a Microsoft 365 data connector, you have at least global administrator or security administrator in that tenant. So it's something important to take care of before Azure security and deployment. But we have some deployment that don't need, for example, that permission. So the integration is as easy as, for example, look for a data connector that you would like to know. If, for example, want to integrate Palo Alto, there's an integration with Palo Alto. If you want to integrate Fortinet, there's an integration with Fortinet. And let's see how easy it is to integrate a data connector with our Azure Sentinel instance. I see Kelvin is typing. If you have any question, feel free to use the mic or use the chat. So, for example, if I want to, let's even make the data connector that Judy wanted to know. It says, no, I actually have to disconnect. Oh, so in data connectors, oh yeah, we have some data connectors that we have, for example, a brief description, and we have all the that I mentioned. The data connectors bring together some related content that are recommendations, some built-in and workbooks, some built-in queries, so built-in analytic tools that you can use to analyze the data in your environment. For example, if you want to deploy Microsoft 365 Defender, and even I'm going to show you how to do it, you only need to have the permissions that you need. You only have you need global administrator or security admin for Microsoft events. If you want to integrate another event, you don't need those permissions, or you only need permissions at the scripture level or resource group level at the license needed for that product. For example, you only need to click activate and we can bring all those events that we have here. For example, let's show you right now with an account that have that permission, that is security admin, that is my personal account. So, for example, let's go to S2 Lab and show you how easy is, for example, deploy and connector with Azure Defender that is something that you wanted to know, we can go to data connectors and go for Azure Defender. We see that there is a data connector for Azure Defender, and we see that have 5 workbooks, 2 queries, and 4 analytics rules. We can go to open connected page. We have a brief description of the things that we have and see what's the requisites are for the Azure Defender deployment. So you only need the permissions to read or write in that tenant, in that workspace. You only need the license for Azure Security Center. It will be a standard tier. It says now you don't need the standard tier specifically. You can use the free Azure Security Center license. You know that you have 2 versions. You have Azure Security Center Basic, that is the free version, and you have the standard tier, that is Azure Defender. For example, if I want to deploy a data connector for Azure Defender, I can go here, select the subscription, and click Connect. And in that way, you have Azure Defender integrated with your Azure Sentinel instance. You see it's enabled, and you see the plan that you have right now. It says I don't have plan right now because in the subscription it's not Azure Defender enabled. I only have enabled Azure Security Center, the basic plan. So if you, for example, want to know, you can go there, and it says if you want to enable Azure Defender plan. So let's go to again to our WordLab account. That was the question that had Judy, if there is an integration, for example, with Azure Security Center. And in that way, see how easy it is to deploy a data connector and integrate it with Azure Sentinel. So for example, I already deployed for all those accounts the Microsoft 365 Defender. For those who don't know, Microsoft 365 Defender is the suite of all the security products that Microsoft have. That includes Microsoft Defender for endpoint protection, Microsoft Defender for identity, Microsoft Defender for Office 365, and their own CAP solution, CASB solution, that is Cloud App Security. You have all those alerts integrated with the same data connector. It's only on preview only. Because of that, if you deploy that data connector, you're going to have integrated Microsoft Cloud App Security, Microsoft Defender for endpoint, Microsoft Defender for identity, and Microsoft Defender for Office 365. And also, I deploy that is a part of that suite solution, that security suite solution, that is Office 365 Defender. It's not necessarily malicious, but you can analyze all the data that is coming to Office 365. For example, I deploy them in Exchange only. For example, you can deploy it in Exchange, SharePoint, and Teams. You can, for example, select the one that you need. For example, I only create for Exchange. You can go to next steps and see those workbooks, queries, and analytics rules that are there in order to analyze that data. As we saw in the beginning in Get Started section, it says, hey, you need to collect data, but after that, you need to create workbooks and create analytics rules in order to analyze that data. So in next step, we have all the built-in analytics rules, query samples, and recommended workbooks that are built in with the data connector. If you don't want to use them, you can create, as I mentioned in the theory, a custom one. For example, you can click to Office 365 and see the workbook that is included. For example, you can save it and select a region and only click OK. And in that way, we are ready to deploy a Azure Sentinel workbook for Exchange, for example. So in that easy way, we can deploy, for example, data connectors. There are a lot of data connectors for a lot of solutions, as you see here. For example, Darktrace, that is very famous. We have AWS, as we saw, and there is also integration with G Suite. There is a lot of integration with most of Azure security solutions. For example, Azure WAF, Azure Firewall, AIP, Azure Information Protection, even for SQL databases. Or for example, if you have a WAF a web application firewall protecting a web page that you have in your environment. You can, for example, analyze all the rules and how they are implemented in your environment, if they are really working or not. Any questions so far about data connectors and all stuff that we mentioned right now? So if anyone have any question, it can write in the chat. So as I mentioned, there are a lot of data connectors. There are some of them that doesn't have, for example, a workbook. If you, for example, have Azure Active Directory and Identity Protection, that is included in Premium Plan 1 and 2 for Azure Active Directory. We're gonna see some incidents right now that I have prepared, and some queries that I include and some analytics rules. For example, let me show you here, for example, in Microsoft Cloud App Security, how important in the deployment is to select what do you want to happen with those alerts. For example, here it's already deployed, but after I click enable in the data connector, here it says in configuration if you want alerts to create an incident in Cloud App Security. So if you receive an alert for Cloud App Security, instantly you will receive an alert from you will have an incident in Azure Sentinel. So as I mentioned, there are some recommended workbooks for each data connector. There are some that doesn't have. There are some query languages if you want to bring, for example, all data or summarize them by severity or bring all logs, and some analytics rules that are built in with that data connector. If you, for example, here say there are 4 and use, for example, use this one that is high, create incident based on Microsoft Cloud App Security alerts. You can go there and create rule and see all the summary about the analytic rule. If you want to modify something, from which product it's coming from, go from general to automate response if you want to automate that response to that alert. And after that, as easy as click create. And in that way, we created, for example, a analytic rule. So those are the data connectors that I brought for you. For example, there is a whole part of analytics. You can go there. If you go there, for example, you see the sellers of Office 365. That's one I created for you to analyze them. It's, for example, you see all the data that is coming from Office 365. It's a custom one. And for example, there are a lot more in analytics rules. Even if you want, for example, analyze a specific one, for example, this one, in an event, one of those incidents that I created is specifically this one that I mentioned in the theory. It's correlate on familiar sign-in properties and a typical tradable alert. So I want to create, for example, it's already implemented. I want, for example, edit, for example, the automation part or what's happening, how that data is brought to Azure Sentinel. I can modify them. For example, incident settings, what I want to happen with those alerts. I want them to create incidents based on the alerts and automate those responses. In this part, all those analytics rules, we can select a playbook or create a new one based on built-in or a custom one that we want to create. So it validates all the information in analytics rules, and we can click save. And in that way, for example, we create an analytic rule. As I mentioned, analytics rules are very needed in Azure Sentinel because we have all the data coming from these different data sources, but how we are going to analyze or how it's going to detect that our issues is in base of machine learning built-in and analytic rules that we provide. So this, for example, is going to make that, for example, if I log in from Dominican Republic and I make an instantly login for another part of the world, it's gonna create an alert based on the public IP and all the information. So what do you think if we go to and analyze our incidents that we have here? Go to the overview panel, and you see, for example, that we have some alerts, some events, and even
Okay.
see.
Sorry, just to confirm.
Yeah.
So far, we've deployed Azure Sentinel, and we've looked at some of the tools and connectors. Can we make sure that all the attendees have actually completed the steps that they need thus far? So does everyone have their Sentinel deployed?
I believe if anyone have any question or got stuck in one part or didn't understand something that I mentioned before, there is no problem in asking in the chat or using the mic.
You may have been going a bit fast, so we just want to make sure if we have to go back, redeploy,
Exactly.
reconnect, whatever we need to do, we'll go ahead and do that now. We do have the time to do that. So please let us know. We just want to make sure everyone has their Sentinel deployed. Please do let us know either through reactions or in the chat.
Hi, this is Anthony. All right.
Yes.
Is there a way to check if it was deployed and deployed successfully from your end? I attempted to deploy it.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it was done successfully. So is there a way to check?
Oh, when you deploy Azure Sentinel, it did deploy successfully.
He's not sure. So maybe we can look at his resource group, Enrique,
Yeah.
and make sure that it's working properly.
Which account do you have, Brandon?
This is Anthony, I believe.
Anthony.
Yeah.
Which account do you have? WordLab. It's which number?
One second. Okay.
It's Work Lab 3, Enrique.
Yes.
Oh.
Work Lab 3.
Yeah. So here I have your environment. And here I see, let me check exactly in your resource group. Let's go to our subscription. Let's go to resource groups. Let's go in your resource group that is number 3. Let's see all the resources that you have. You have the local analytics and also the one that you created before. And if I go to Azure Sentinel, it should be created LRW WordLab ST3. That's the one that I created before, and the one that you created that's named IGL LTD. So if I go to Azure Sentinel, there you go. I see, for example, IGL LTD. Yeah, it's created. So for example, if I go into that Azure Sentinel instance, it's created successfully. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Of course. So let's continue. And let's go.
Enrique, sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Brandon is also saying that his was not deployed.
Let me check.
He missed. Could you check for him as well?
Right now. So Brandon has 11 lab. Let me check if there was a problem with that lab right now. Even let me do it right now if it's need to be deployed. There you go. Let me go to that resource group. He have the 11 account, and let me see if there's the instance created. Oh, there's no resource created right now. Let's create an instance for you right now, and let's integrate that data for you, Brandon. Apparently, there was an issue with the deployment of the resources in that subscription. It was deployed with a template, and all the data was for all the resource group. Maybe there was an issue in the deployment for you. Let me do it really quickly. For lab ST11, check and click create. So after we create that local analytics instance for Brandon, that's going to be being deployed, go to Azure Sentinel. After we deploy that in for Brandon, I'm going to get familiar with the incidents that I'm going to be after the local analytics workspace is created and create the Azure Sentinel. We're going to be talking about the incidents that we have in your environment right now. For example, there are going to be 3 incidents in your environment that we're going to review very quickly. So Brandon, have your local analytics workspace, and let's create your Azure Sentinel workspace. So there you go. There you go. Now it's created. So let me show you really quickly. For everyone, it's good to know how it's going to be deployed the Microsoft 365 Defender connector. For example, I look for it. I go to Open Connector page and see how easy it's to integrate all the incidents that I mentioned. For example, you only need to click Incidents and Alerts, and with that click, you integrate all those security products. Defender for Endpoint, Defender for Identity, Office 365, and Cloud App Security. If I go back, or if I want to create something else, I can go to Azure Sentinel. If you want to create Azure some analytics tools, you want to create some workbooks, you can create it without permissions. So the only permissions that you needed, it was for the data connector. If I go, for example, to Azure Sentinel, your instance, if I refresh, you're gonna see that we have some data connectors and deployed. So yeah, already you have 365 Defender, Cloud App Security, Defender for Endpoint, Defender for Identity, and Defender for Office 365. There you go. Yeah. Francis, which data connector you are trying to deploy? Yeah, it's as I mentioned, for deployment in deploy data connectors using Microsoft 365, you need some requirements that are these that I'm going to show you. So it's important to know that you have all those requirements in your environment in order to deploy that data connector. That are the license, that are the role, if you have global admin or if you have security admin. So see, the requirements are these 3. If you have one of those licenses talking about security in your environment to integrate all those security events from those products, and you need tenant permissions, tenant roles. If you don't have global admin or security admin, you won't be able to deploy that data connector. Because of that, I already deployed that data connector for your instances. And also,
so to be clear,
yeah.
Sorry. To be clear, although we're deploying a brand new Azure Sentinel instance to show you guys how that works, in order to set up the connectors, there are some permissions, licensing and role-based permissions that are required to the Microsoft 365 tenant that we're connected. So for this moment, exactly, Francis, we're not adding the connectors to our new Azure Sentinel instance. We're showing you where the connectors are and how they work so that you can do it with your own tenants. But for the lab purposes, you should all have a pre-created Azure Sentinel instance, and that's the one we're going to be working with because that one has already been set up exactly the way we need it. So we're looking at the connectors and how they work so that you can do it with your own tenants.
Exactly.
But because of licensing and permissions constraints, you're not going to be able to do it with the Sentinel instances you create right now. Rather, you're going to use the pre-created Azure Sentinel instance.
Exactly. So if there is enough time, we're gonna see a data connector that doesn't need. Let me see it from here. Let me show you. Let me show you real quickly all the incidents and all the capabilities here in Azure Sentinel. And let's see if there is enough time to deploy, for example, a Windows machine and integrate all the events, all the security events from that Windows machine in Azure Sentinel. For example, in this data connector, you can see that there is no need for have a license. You only need, for example, a resource. You only need a Azure virtual machine or even a non-Azure virtual machine. You create a data collection rule, and we select the resources. If there is enough time, after I show you all the things about the events and about the incidents, we can do it in our environment. You can see how to deploy, for example, Azure Sentinel, for example, for a Windows Server 2019. So let's see. Let's see, for example, we have some incidents. In my case, I have more incidents than you. In your environment, it could be only 3 around, only 4 incidents. Let me confirm. And let me see, for example, the lab number 2. And I can see that there are 3 incidents. And sadly, you're only going to have these incidents that I'm going to mention. For example, this one that I was making some tests, that email was delete some malicious content before after delivery. So this is an informational alert brought from this product, Microsoft 365 Defender. It's an alert I have here. I'm going to show you from 365 Defender. We have that alert and from the product who's assigned to the status of the incident and about the severity. We can modify that severity. Right now by default is informational because the malicious was removed. But if you consider that is medium or high, we can modify with some clicks. So, for example, let's assign that incident to your account. For example, where lab SS and select your account. There you go. I didn't put TV. Is there no appearing? For example, let me see. For example, you can try to assign to me. That is enrique.cornell. You can see, for example, how you can assign all that incident to a specific user or a specific group. If you have, for example, a group of security analysts, you can see and assign that incident to that group. For example, I say Enrique is going to be searching, investigating that incident. I assign Enrique. I can put the status of the incident modified. By default, it coming from new. Well, if you are working on that incident, you can modify it to active, and it's a very soft. You can close the solution. You can close the incident. You select a classification if it was benign, if it was true positive, if it was false positive, is undetermined, and click and write a comment. So you see here a summary of the incidents about how many alerts create that incident, the tactics that was used to, or how it classifies that using the Mitra attack framework. And for example, in this case was initial access. It didn't get to the email, to the mailbox. It was only informational that, hey, someone tried to send malware to your tenant. I removed it for you, but just to let you know. So here, I, for example, investigate in Microsoft 365 Defender. From there was the incident. I can click there and go directly to Microsoft 365 Defender. I'm not going to log in from here because I have it right here in this environment. If I go to incidents, I'm gonna show you how it's gonna see it in from there. Let me show you right now. I make it log in from here to go directly to the alert. So let me log in my account. It's gonna ask me for a Microsoft approve sign in. I'll approve it. And there you go. It's coming in. And there you go. So in that way, you can go directly to the product that is coming from the alert and analyze that alert in your environment. It was a test that I was doing with some mailbots here in the company. So it says the alert directly from the product that was coming from, and you can see all the alerts that was created, the informational, what happened, and which mailbots were affected to that incident. So in that way, you can analyze all the data from the same pane of glass. For example, if it was from this one, you have this one that is about new open authorization app. That was one that I created for you. It only means that someone created a new application in your environment and used some open authorization credentials, and I create that incident and those alerts, and is you receive some alerts based on new or open authorization app. It doesn't mean it's malicious, but you can investigate what happened and if was a developer in your environment or if was something malicious. So you can click on the incident, and in this case, let's see how automatically was assigned to solver the student 3 that was where lab student SS3. Let's in this case close the incident. Let's put a classification. In this case, let's put false positive. We can put a comment, and we can apply that comment. So in that way, we can analyze all the data, and also we have an incident link that, for example, if you are a security team, you say, you can analyze that incident for me or review that incident, you can copy that link, and if someone pastes that link, it's going directly to the incident. So it's something really important to know before analyzing incidents in Azure Sentinel. So those what about talking about incidents. If you will want to know about workbooks, there are a lot of workbooks. You can deploy them directly from data connectors, and you can see in an integrated way how those workbooks are for that data connectors. You can see your workbooks that are deployed. For example, there are some that are deployed in your environment right now, and some templates. As I mentioned in the theory, there are more than 100 templates right now. And if you want, you can create a custom one based on a KQL query, based on a query that you can create and modify by yourself. So something really important to know if you want to analyze data, for example, in a specific way. You can see that workbook or that graphic, and if you have data that applies to that graphic, that workbook, you can see it from the workbook section. So we have some parts here, for example, in hunting that I mentioned. For example, you can go to hunting, and as I mentioned in the theory, we can go from a defensive wave to an offensive wave if you are interested in see if a failed login attempted by a expired account is someone that have an expired password that need to change. It's not it can't log in. You can go and run that query. You can select the query that you want to run and select those query. Also, if you want to know if those queries are applied to your environment based on all the information that we have, all the logs, all the events that we have in our environment. We can select all the queries and run the selected queries, and you can see how the results are coming here. Using, for example, the result count and the queries run. This is going to run all the hunting rules, and as you can see, there are some all are based in KQL queries. So you can see also the entities that are affected if it's an account or if a host. So if there is any match of those hunting rules, you're gonna see a result like one from those queries. So you can go there and analyze them. And even you can deploy a custom query. So it's something really important to know, talking about hunting, and these are the integrations that I mentioned before with machine learning notebooks and Jupyter notebooks. And there are even some notebooks that are not from hunting, and instead of that are for learning, for example, getting started. Talking about Azure machine learning notebooks. And most of them are for investigation and hunting. So a part of that, as I mentioned, let's make a demo. Even let's do it right now about how data connectors, and we can use watch lists. Let's create an Excel and let's upload it, for example, for some IP address. Even let me create it right now. If you have any questions so far, there's no problem in asking right now. Let's, for example, create a really fast Excel from some IP address. And for example, let's create a header. There's gonna be a name IP address. We can have something like this. Let me show you. For example, in that way, as I mentioned, as someone was participating about talking about watch list, we can integrate data that we have and we want to analyze directly in Azure Sentinel. We can, for example, put put some emails and see if those emails are in Azure Sentinel based on a CSV and document. For example, in this case, I created a Excel document. Let's save it as CSV. That is the extension that is needed for the watch list to analyze. For example, I already created a watch list document in CSV. And for example, let's analyze it in watch list and section. If anyone have one question, I see Maria Silvia is typing.
Remember, that's actually Cesar.
Yeah. So, for example, let's put test and watch lists. We can put some description. This is going to be pen testing IPs, for example. That's the name I put, and an alias for the watch list. So pen testing IPs. So let's go to source. And for example, we're going to select a CSV file with a header. And let's, for example, drop that document into the box or select it and look for it in your computer. For example, I can deploy it and see how automatically it convert all that data, this data that I show you in Excel, that was here, that was an IP address with some random IP address, and we can see them in watch list, how it convert them there. So give me a minute because it's really making Excel is making some troubles. It says not responding right now. Could be for all the apps that I have right now open. So let's change to what I finish. We have my CSV document and all the data that we integrate to watchlist. We can review and create that watchlist. Let's see what's missing. And the search key field. That was the header. If you have more headers, for example, our users or devices, entities, you can select it from here. It'll automatically know which are the headers. So let's go to review and create, validation passed, and we can create a watch list. And based on that watch list, we can see it on local analytics and analyze that data. For example, make some custom queries, some KQL queries based on that data. If that data is inside of this, on all these data that we have here, all those events, on all these, and all those events and all these incidents inside Azure Sentinel. And for example, here that I didn't mention that at the beginning, that also that is in preview, all the functionalities and capabilities that are in preview are being tested right now for Microsoft, but I'm being able to be deployed in a production environment. So, for example, we have solution. For example, we have a lot of solutions that are being deployed in Azure, and we can deploy them directly from their marketplace. For example, if you want to use Qualys VM for vulnerability scan in your environment, you can deploy it from the marketplace and integrate all those information with Azure Sentinel. So all of these are solutions instead of data connectors. Are different because if you have, for example, a solution, it doesn't matter if it's on-premise, if it's another cloud solution, all of that, you can deploy it from data connector. But if you want the whole solution and integrate it automatically with Azure Sentinel, you can deploy them from the solutions panel. For example, McAfee Evo and G Suite and Google Cloud Platform. So we are almost finishing. Something really important talking about the lab. We're gonna leave the lab open until Thursday night, 11:59 p.m. for all of you that want to test some things. For example, deploy a virtual machine and integrate some alerts and make some tests in that virtual machine. There is no problem in do it after we finish the workshop. So let's do a really quickly and integration with Windows Server. I would really like to do it right now. We are in short of time, but let me see if we can do it really quickly. So for all of you that can keep following, for example, we have Windows security events, and we see that we have that data connector in preview. The only requirement that we have here is the need of deploy a virtual machine in Azure, or even using Azure Arc to integrate those events. For example, let's create very quickly a virtual machine and integrate all those alerts from that virtual machine, create a data connector, and bring all those security events to Azure Sentinel. So you can go directly to virtual machine and create a virtual machine.
Enrique, I believe Judith had a question. She was raising her hand.
Yeah, let me see right now.
Feel free, Judith, to unmute.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a question now that you've just touched on virtual machines. One of the developer asked a question in terms of the logs. You develop a custom app and you have it deployed on a VM or a container in Azure. You want to enable application logging. Is it enough that we enable the logging on the application using whatever application services there are in Azure? Or does the developer have to add some kind of login code in the application? My response was you can you can go to the particular app service or the container and turn on the application login there.
Yeah, talking about application services directly from Azure, you can integrate all those data about logs, but yeah, it's needed to be turned on the loads in the application services. And all those loads are bringing to Azure Sentinel. And
Okay.
even
So do we have to turn on the login at the on the application server, the VM, and the container?
no,
Those
if you
are
yeah, for example, it depends on how depends that you want to see. If it's an application service, you can see, for example, and bring all those logs from Azure, but those is not application logs. It's gonna be Azure Activity or Azure Monitor that you bring and you connect to Azure Sentinel. You're gonna
okay,
bring the
perfect.
logs directly from Azure. If, for example, if it was a problem in Azure to and turn on the application service, if it was an issue, if there was an update, it's a different type of logs that you bring from and application services. But if for example, a virtual machine, for example, we have two types of logs in Windows. For example, we can have logs that happen in Azure. For example, if there is a health check, if the virtual machine is down, if the virtual machine is having problems, that we can use it using Azure Activity for any product that we have. But if we want, for example, the security events, for example, for a virtual machine in Windows Server 2019 is another type of logs, another type of events. We are ingesting all the data from here, all the security events. For example, in security events, you have here in Event Viewer the security events from security, common, minimal, and custom, all the security events. Is that the difference? If, for example, if you do it from Azure, if you are bringing together all the security events from Azure, and if you're bringing all the events from Windows, you're bringing all the security events that you have here in Windows. I don't know if you have another question. So let's see if there's enough time to make a really quick deployment of virtual machine and show you how you can integrate all those events to Azure Sentinel. So let's go to build or your resource group. You can go to directly from your resource group and click create. So here in the panel, we can select Windows Server 2019 data center version and create a virtual machine with that image. So we can create a name. We can make it really quickly. Time for that. So we can make that part by default. That version, standard P2S that have 2 virtual CPUs, 4 GB of RAM. And let's create an username and password for that VM. For example, let's put Enrique for you. You can create a pair of credentials that you want with your name and any passwords that you want that can complete with the password policy that they have. So if anyone have any issue or get stuck creating the virtual machine, it's not directly part from the workshop, but I really would like you to know how to make that integration. So after you create that, let's make this default, allow selected ports, and let's open RDP only for testing. In a production environment, don't do that. Doesn't let RDP open. You have a question, Judith? I see your hands up. And so let's continue. In disk, we can, for example, let's select standard HDD. It's only for For testing, and leave everything by default. In networking, left everything by default. It's going to create a VNet, a virtual network. It's going to create a public IP address to connect, and you're going to have a network security group, basic, and the RDP port that you leave open before. You can go to management. If, for example, here, yeah, we have Azure Security Center basic plan coming on, and let's disable bot diagnostic only for the test, because it's gonna make trouble and it's gonna make the boots even slower. So let's make this by default. Let's shut down. Let's uncheck the enable auto shutdown and leave everything else by default. So in advance, leave everything by default. Let's now create some tasks, and let's review and create the virtual machine. That's the only requirement that we need to deploy the Windows Security Events connector. It's going to review everything, and we are going to create the resource. So after we create the resource, we're going to create the data connector to integrate all those security events, or even custom the security events from that virtual machine, and analyze those events to Azure Sentinel. And remember that we can integrate all the data from virtual machines. It doesn't matter that is in Azure or is on-premise. It's finishing off creating the virtual machine. It's only missing the compute part. It already created all the security resources. I already have my resource created. And for example, if you go to resource, we have our virtual machine, and we have already turned on. So that's the only requirement. Feel free if you want to connect to your virtual machine, but if you don't want to know, or if you would really want to know, I will show you how to connect to virtual machines. So we can go to our Azure Sentinel instance again, and let's now create our data connector to Windows machines. So
before we do that, Enrique, we have around 8 minutes left. So just to be very clear, we are actually a little bit out of scope of the lab, but this is a sort of bonus material we wanted to share with you. Was everybody able to deploy that VM? We essentially just deployed a default VM. Really, there's nothing.
Nothing complex.
Yeah, no special. Though we did disable some things to make sure the deployment went faster. If you literally left everything by default, it's fine. It's no problem. So just let us know if you were able to get that VM deployed.
Exactly. Yes. So
awesome.
After we create our resource, we can go here to data connectors and go for Windows security events. So there are two versions to integrate Windows security events with Azure Sentinel. There are another one that is called security events without Windows. The difference are that security events bring all the logs from a Windows machine, and if you don't want to analyze all the events, minimal logs, as we have here, if you don't want to analyze minimal logs or critical logs, that kind of things, it's gonna bring a lot of logs to our environment. With Windows security events, that is the newest version, we can integrate it and make a custom query to bring all those logs. The only requirement, as I mentioned, is to have permissions in the subscription and to deploy resources. All of you have those permissions. So let's create that data collection rule that is the responsible of bringing all that data to Azure Sentinel. So let's make a rule name. And make a name. It doesn't matter which name you put. So after that, we select the resource. We're gonna add resources, and you're gonna select the scope. You're gonna see your VM in the hierarchy. For example, you're gonna have the subscription. You're gonna have all the resource group that you have available to see, and you're gonna see the virtual machine directly. So you're gonna see VM WordLab ST or the name that you put there. So we can click apply. There you see how it's integrated, or if you want to integrate another virtual machine, another resource. And after that is the most important part, which data you want to bring to Azure Sentinel. If you want to bring all the security events, if you want to bring the common ones, the minimum ones, or even make a custom one. Talking about custom ones, you need to create for example, an expression based on XPath. That is the way that Microsoft bring all those logs to my Azure Sentinel. For example, it could be this one that I have here. Even I think I have one here in Notepad. There you go. I was analyzing an incident and I have this one ready. So in this way, for example, in CMD, you can, for example, bring that log to Azure Sentinel. If you, for example, only want to analyze some security events based on those ID or another query that you want to create. For those that don't know, if that query only does this in Windows PowerShell, you can copy that query and it's only going to bring the logs that have that ID, that event ID. So for those that would like to have that query, if you are a security analyst or are interested in about security events, it's very important to know about XPath. That is the way that Microsoft bring security events to Azure Sentinel and the way that they analyze them. We can review and create that data collection rule, and in that way, see how simple it is to integrate, for example, a Windows virtual machine with Azure Sentinel. See how easy we create a virtual machine, create a data connection rule, and select which security events I would like to analyze. And the next step, of course, is which workbooks and queries and analytics rules you want to apply to them. So if you are interested in making some more deployments about Azure Sentinel, feel free to try them because you are gonna have access until Thursday night, as I mentioned, until tomorrow. So I think it was a very good overview about all the capabilities that we have in Sentinel, about how you can configure data connectors, how you have analytics, about how you have workbooks to analyze all the incidents, and how you can analyze them and see all the incidents that you have in your environment, and how it's needed to in your on-premise environment. And nowadays, to all those events, all those security events coming from a lot of data sources that I mentioned at the beginning with spanning digital estate, it's more important to analyze all that data with tools as Azure Sentinel that use machine learning to, from billions and billions of data, see what's really important for your company. So I think if anyone have any more question or would like to know something else about Azure Sentinel, I'm gonna leave you with Nestor, but feel free to ask anything in the chat.
All right. Thank you very, very much, Enrique. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this morning. If you have any questions, as Enrique mentioned, feel free to unmute and ask them or just drop them in the chat. We realized that was a lot, and in a short period of time, our bootcamp sessions are designed to be intense. So there's a lot happening in a short period of time. However, we don't just want to leave you. So what's next if you're interested in learning more about Sentinel? Well, as Enrique mentioned, the lab environment is going to be open until essentially midnight tomorrow. So feel free to take advantage of that. I do apologize if you can hear my dogs going a bit crazy. There seems to be someone walking around the neighborhood. But let's talk other resources to help you guys get started with Sentinel. You can, of course, begin an Azure trial if you already have an Azure subscription and you have budget for testing. Then feel free to go ahead and create an Azure Sentinel instance and start playing around with it. If you're concerned about budget and what this is going to cost me, let us know. Get in touch with your Inova account manager, get in touch with myself or any other member of the Azure Task Force, because there may be proof of concept funds or other Microsoft programs that we can help you take advantage of to offset the cost of learning this technology, of being able to learn how Azure Sentinel fits within your organization and then using it in your day-to-day. So feel free to get started. As for us today, this morning, please do take our quiz. Let's see how much we were able to learn. So Marcy, Adriana, if you want to run that, let's go ahead and get started.
Hi everyone, I'm back. So to see if you guys kept up with the workshop and if you understood everything right, we're gonna do a short little quiz. I'm going to enter right now the link and the join code for the quiz, but you can also scan the QR code on the screen and sign in to participate in the quiz. So we're just gonna wait a couple of minutes for everyone to join. So what you do is you join the link, you enter the join code, and then you can enter your username. You got 45 seconds to answer each question. We have 10 questions. It's about the session, but it's some random questions as well. The faster you answer you give the correct answer, the more point you get. So we'd love for you guys to join. Please let me know if you have trouble joining. Yes, and the join code is 503146. So when you scan the QR code, you will get a join code. You need to enter that code, 503146. Yes, I see Cesar has already joined. Thank you.
Marcy, I'm not sure if you want to share your screen so they can see the quiz view.
Yes, I can.
Awesome.
No, well, it's actually not necessary because you can see it on the screen that you've joined. You can see the quiz, so you do not need to see my screen necessarily. But of course, I can share if you want.
I think it would be nice. It shows us progress as they start moving through the quiz. It's a nice little visual.
All right, will do.
Awesome.
Yes, can you see my screen now?
All right, feel free to join the quiz. There's no pressure. You're not going to be graded. It's just a fun little thing for us to do. Please do join our quiz.
You can also just name yourself anonymous if you do not want to put your name on it. Does not matter. We're just here for the fun.
Can you access without the QR code?
Yes, in the chat, I've entered a link that says join the quiz. If you enter that link and after you click the link, you enter the join code, you can join the quiz. You do not need to.
So I'm not seeing the link, but I went ahead and posted it. So go ahead and use joinmyquiz.com/pro, as you can see on screen and as I posted in the chat. And then you can use that join code there, 503146, to join the game.
I'm gonna try sharing it again. Maybe it didn't share correctly the first time. I do see it in my chat, so maybe it's taking a little while to appear in yours. I'm just gonna share this with Adriana so she can try and share it in your.
Oh, that's all right.
Oh, he did?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's no
All
problem.
right.
It's there. It's there. We're good. All right. I see we have Anthony, we have Cesar, we have Legacy, we have a person, we have Adri. This is
So
good.
shall
This
we
is
get
good.
started then?
Anybody else
Oh,
want to?
Judith
There
is
we go.
also
We
there.
have
Great,
Judith.
Judith. Great that you
Awesome.
joined. All right, let's
All
get
right.
started, guys.
Let's try it. Let's go for it.
Let's go for it. Remember, the faster you answer the correct question, the more point you get, okay?
Is
I'm gonna
anybody
get
still
started.
before you press the start button? Is anybody still trying to join? Or are
No, I
we
think
all
everyone's-
here?
I think we're all here.
And let's do it.
Okay, cool. All right, so we have Cesar at the top here. All right, guys, so we're seeing Cesar as the absolute winner of our quiz. Cesar, congratulations. You really did very well. We're very happy to see that. And Judith in second place and A-Person in third place. Congrats, guys. You guys did very well. We're very happy that you guys learned so much today. Before we finish our session, I would like to inform you all that you will receive a certificate of participation in this workshop. So you will receive a nice little souvenir from our workshop today. And I would also like to ask you to give us your feedback. We would love to hear from you what you thought of our session, what you think we can do better. Remember, we do this for you. We want to share our knowledge. We want to share our expertise with you. And these boot camps are one of the reasons why we do this, next to our webinars, next to our other activities. So we really want to hear from you guys. What can we do better? What do you think is going well? How would you do some certain things? So please let us know, fill in the survey. We would love to hear from you what your thoughts are. As I mentioned before, you will be getting a certificate of participation for this workshop because we do believe you've learned so much today. The next workshop will be on October 20th. Enrique and Nestor, since you guys are the experts in this area, please share with us what our guests, what our participants will be learning in this next workshop. I'm sure it's going to be just as informative and you will learn so much. But Nestor and Enrique, please go a little bit more into the details so we can get our people excited.
Absolutely. So in this workshop, we looked a little bit at Azure Sentinel, how it fits within your organizations, what its capabilities are, why you would need it. We then went into a hands-on lab where we were able to actually deploy our own Azure Sentinel instance. And then in order to not have to fiddle around with licenses and permissions, we used a pre-deployed instance of Sentinel to look at how connectors, incidents, and analyzing all of this information works, how Sentinel filters through the noise and brings up only the details that are important to me and to my organization. We were able to connect our Sentinel instance, or at least to see it connected to several data sources, among them a Microsoft 365 tenant and Microsoft 365 security tools. So in our next workshop, we want to take that a step further, and we want to look at the SOAR aspect, or the security orchestration and automated response aspect of Sentinel. And we want to look at how we can do more with this technology so that we don't need someone to manually be looking and responding to these incidents, but so that we can actually take the most common incidents and incidents where the response is relatively simple to automate and go ahead and do that. Whether that automation is simply creating an incident in my ITSM platform, in my ticket management platform, or whether the automation is to completely mitigate or resolve the incident. So that's what we'll be doing in our October 20 webinar. We'll look at how to automate responses using Azure Sentinel. We really encourage you all to be there. As we mentioned, there is a special bonus for attendees and participants in both webinars. We will be producing a guide with not just the step-by-step, well, not to be redundant, but steps that we followed in both workshops, but we will also provide best practice recommendations as to how to deploy Sentinel and data sources to connect it to. So it's a really valuable resource that will only be made available to attendees of both webinars. So we encourage you to go ahead and be there. The invites will be sent out via email shortly, so feel free to click through those, get yourselves registered, get everything squared off so you can be with us on October 20th. Your feedback from today's session and workshop will be used to customize that second workshop. So it's very important that if there's something that you wish could have been improved from today's workshop, that you go into that evaluation form. Adriana is going to actually not just provide the QR, but link the survey in the chat and tell us what you thought and what your feedback was. Really, that's it for us today. We realized it was a long session. You were probably hungry if you're in Puerto Rico or in the GMT -4 time zone. It is 12 p.m. for you. So we will let you go without much more to share. My contact information and Enrique's contact information is on screen right now. Thank you again very, very much for joining us. We do realize your time is valuable, and we thank you for spending it with us. Thanks, and have a wonderful rest of your day.